All right, let's get into it. We've got a massive stack of material here: reviews, interviews, deep dive articles, even academic takes, and viewer discussions online, all focused on Squid Game's big return.
Season 2. Yeah, it landed with a huge splash, didn't it? Lots to unpack.
Definitely. So our mission today basically is to sift through all this stuff, figure out what makes season 2 tick. We're talking plot, characters new and old, the themes, how they've maybe amplified them, and that sharp social critique it's known for.
Exactly. We want to pull out the really key insights, the important bits from all these sources. Think of it like your essential breakdown.
Like Spark Notes, but, for a seriously dark thriller that drags you right back into that hellscape. So yeah, let's dive back in.
The return in the players.
Okay, so the biggest return, obviously, is Sang Gi-hun, player 456.
Right. Season 1 ends. He wins all that money, but then he doesn't get on the plane. Turns back. Season 2 picks up right there. He's going back.
And the sources, they really dig into this. He's changed. I mean, how could he not be? He survived, yeah, but he's carrying all that trauma, all that blood money.
He seems harder. Definitely haunted.
Yeah.
But it's more than just survival now, isn't it? The sources say he's actively trying to take the games down.
That's the shift. From survivor to, an active antagonist, his mission is to dismantle the whole operation.
That's a huge undertaking. Does any of the old Gi-hun peek through? I know some sources mentioned his friend Jung-bae.
Yeah, exactly. There are glimpses, especially with Jung-bae. He's not totally gone, but he's reshaped, fundamentally, by what he went through and this new purpose.
So what's really driving him? Is it just revenge or...
It seems to be mostly about the money. The sources really emphasize his inability to actually live with it. It's tainted. It represents everyone who died.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Guilt, revulsion.
Totally. And that seems to fuel this determination, this idea that he has to save other people from that fate and, maybe more ambitiously, actually stop the games for good.
Yeah.
Use his position, maybe even the money itself, to fight back.
Okay, but how effective is he? Because the sources...
Yeah.
They weren't all convinced by his methods, were they? Some questioned the realism.
Right. There's specific criticism mentioned about this unrealistic gun battle thing he apparently gets involved in. One source called it over the top.
So, it felt more Michael Bay than Squid Game?
Kind of, yeah. The feeling was that maybe some of these external fight scenes were more about creating cool scenes, action moments, rather than flowing logically from Gahon's character or a believable way to fight this massive hidden organization.
It maybe felt a bit disconnected.
For some critics, yeah. Disconnected from that grounded psychological horror of season 1.
And what about his moral compass? Because fighting fire with fire can get messy. Sources mention his morals might be slipping.
That comes up too, especially this idea of him calling the rebellion effort a sacrifice. Sacrificing lives, that's a really different Gi-hun than the guy crying over marbles in season 1.
It shows how the fight itself, the world he's in, can kind of corrupt you, even if you're trying to do good.
Absolutely. And this darker, more morally gray path he's on, it's fueled a big fan theory that pops up in a lot of the sources.
Oh, yeah. Which one?
That Gi-hun might actually be on track to become the next frontman.
Wow. Okay. Because the current frontman was a winner too, right? Hwang In-ho.
Exactly. The theory goes that Gi-hun's trauma, his willingness to make these sacrifices, his deep entanglement, it could twist him. He could end up mirroring the very guy he's trying to stop. It's a pretty chilling idea about how power and violence can just perpetuate themselves.
That really leans into the show's pessimism, doesn't it? And speaking of the system's machinery, the recruiter, Gong Yu's character, he's back.
Yep. Still out there playing Dokji or whatever the equivalent is, finding desperate people.
And there's a key scene mentioned in the sources, right, where he confronts Gi-hun.
Yeah, multiple sources flag this one. Apparently really tense, great acting. He tests Gi-hun with Russian roulette, forces him right back into that psychological game space.
Yeah, and his attitude.
Mm-hmm.
The sources mentioned him stomping on bread offered to potential players.
Yeah, and then claiming they chose the gamble over the food. It's just bleak. One source called it a demonstration of a really misanthropic view, like a libel against mankind.
Believing the worst in people.
Yeah.
That they'll always choose the gamble.
Pretty much. He embodies that twisted logic of the games that people are inherently driven by greed or desperation to take the long shot, even if it kills them. Sources say he's unhinged, but also, smart. Good at his job of recruiting and staying hidden.
He's the lure, the friendly face of the abyss.
Right. Preying on that vulnerability.
So if he's recruiting, there must be new players. And the sources say they pretty much highlight the same core issue, right? Debt. Desperation.
Absolutely. The economic hardship that drove season 1 is still very much the engine. We meet a bunch of new faces: Kang No-yul, Myung-gi, Junhee, Young-sik, Junja, and Jungba, Gi-hoon's friend. Their stories vary, but the common thread is being trapped. Debt, lack of opportunity. The games become the only terrible option left.
And a couple of these new players really stood out in the source material, adding significant new dimensions. Let's talk about Hyunju, player 120. Sources compared her impact to Ollie's in season 1.
Yeah, she's highlighted quite a bit. Her backstory is directly tied into a very specific, very real issue in South Korea. She's a trans woman.
Okay.
And apparently she was a skilled special forces officer, but after transitioning, she faced rejection from family, friends, lost her job, which led to serious debt. That's what pushes her into the game.
How did the sources feel about her portrayal? Because that's obviously sensitive territory.
It's interesting. The analysis suggests that while she definitely faces prejudice, that othering you'd expect both in society and in the game, the show reportedly avoids making a spectacle of her trauma.
So it's not just exploiting her identity for shock value.
Apparently not, according to these sources. One specifically said her trauma isn't spectacleized. Interactions with other players often show earnest curiosity rather than just hate, and over time some characters come to understand her situation better.
Is there an example?
Yeah, one source mentioned a bathroom scene, specifically noting it avoided negative stereotypes like no turf-eye woman, and instead focused on misunderstanding evolving towards empathy.
That makes her story a direct commentary then. Sources link her situation explicitly to the difficulties trans people face in South Korea.
Directly. The harshness and poverty and barriers, as one source put it. There's even mention her character might be inspired by a real-life case of a Korean officer dismissed for their gender identity. It grounds it heavily.
Wow. And how does she fare in the games?
Despite the prejudice, she's described as likable, skilled, uses her background, shows good leadership, helps out weaker players like this character Kim Young-mi and a mother-son pair. She forms connections.
It's a Squid Game, so there's a but.
There's always a but. Her conflict comes from that debt. Sources say she feels she has to keep playing, even when allies she cares about, like Young-mi, want out. That choice, forced by money, contributes to her downfall. And apparently, Young-mi's death hits her harder than her own potential elimination. The human connection overrides self-preservation for a moment.
Another example of the system twisting everything, even loyalty. Now, we have to mention the casting, right? The sources brought this up.
Yeah, definitely. The role was played by a cisgender man. Sources discuss the director's explanation difficulty finding a suitable Korean trans actor.
Which, understandably, caused controversy.
For sure. Lots of criticism. But some sources offered a maybe more nuanced view. They acknowledged the criticism, but argued that despite the casting, the actual portrayal, the focus on empathy, avoiding spectacle, the journey to understanding was still seen as a huge net positive for representation in Korean media context. It's definitely a complex point with strong opinions on both sides reported.
Okay. Another standout new character mentioned was Thanos, played by T.O.P.
Right. Choi Sung-hyun. His backstory is 2024. A former rapper who got caught up in a crypto scam. Huge debt.
And his personality in the game.
Described as enjoying the sadism, coming up with callous strategies. But one source had a really pointed critique about a specific detail, him taking mysterious pills.
Pills, what kind of interpretation did they have?
A pretty critical one. This source saw it as a toxic message, suggesting the show portrays synthetic drugs. They mentioned stuff like Xanax, Adderall, opioids as awesome tools for coping and winning under pressure.
So like an allegory for using drugs to get ahead or just survive in our high-pressure society.
Exactly. The idea being the pills let him be focused, relaxed, detached, and sociopathic enough to perform and win. It's a strong, somewhat provocative reading of that element.
And his casting was also controversial, wasn't it? Because of T.O.P.'s past conviction.
Yeah, for marijuana use. Sources mentioned the director addressing this, saying he wanted someone who'd faced consequences, been sidelined professionally because of drugs, and seemed surprised by the backlash, suggesting maybe views differ outside Korea, or that the character might resonate differently with young Koreans.
How did viewers react to Thanos, according to the sources?
Mixed bag, it seems. Some found him annoying, others saw him as maybe intentional comic relief or just another commentary on fallen celebrity culture.
And any other quick notes on new player dynamics?
Just brief mentions, like player 388 having a moment of insecurity about his masculinity, which is kinda darkly funny given the stakes. And again, characters like Jungbae being important for showing us different sides of Gi-hoon now.
The games and the stakes.
Okay, let's move to the games themselves. The playground. Sources confirm we're back in those unsettlingly bright, childish spaces, right? Schoolyards, merry-go-rounds.
Oh yeah, that signature aesthetic is back. And it's very deliberate, according to the director cited in one source. Maximize the contrast, make the violence hit harder. They even apparently integrated the Netflix logo into some sets.
Whoa, really? That's meta.
A little bit, yeah. A jarring reminder of who's bringing you this particular hellscape.
So beyond the look, what about the actual new games? Sources mentioned Pentathlon and Mingle.
Right. And Mingle seems to be the one that really got people talking. Multiple sources called it creative, super stressful, intense, a real standout.
Okay, break down Mingle for us. How does it work?
It sounds simple but brutal. Players are on a big rotating platform. It stops. They announce a group number, say groups of 3 or 5 or whatever. Players have to scramble to form groups of that exact size and get into designated rooms around the edge before time runs out.
And if you don't make it?
Or you're in the wrong size group. Elimination. Instantly. Failure means death.
Jeez. Okay, I can see how that would be tense, the psychological pressure.
Huge. Sources described it as horrifyingly quick and simple. Filmed with tons of tension, slow-mo shots of people scrambling. It's all about snap judgments. Forming alliances on the fly, deciding who to include, who to push away. Life or death in seconds.
How did the new games generally stack up against Season 1's iconic ones? Red light, green light, etc.
The consensus seems a bit mixed. Some sources felt the new batch wasn't always quite as jaw-clenching or instantly memorable as Season 1's, but Mingle. That one frequently got singled out as being right up there, hitting that same level of intensity.
Gotcha. Now, something else that returned from Season 1 was the vote, right? The players getting a chance to leave.
Yes, that crucial mechanism is back. And they hold a vote pretty early in Season 2, right after the first game. It immediately throws that dilemma back at them.
What were the arguments like this time, according to the sources?
Pretty raw. Sources detail players like Number 100, a middle-aged businessman desperately arguing to stay, chanting, "One more game, one more game." Not just out of greed, but because going back means facing that same crushing debt they ran from. The game, however horrific, feels like the only chance out.
But others must have pleaded to leave.
Oh yeah, characters like Kim Young-mi just tearfully begging to go home, pure survival instinct kicking in against the awful odds.
And the outcome, how did the vote go?
Chillingly, the majority votes to stay. Sources describe the pleas to leave getting drowned out by, well, one source called them gamblers high on adrenaline. People convinced they can beat the odds, forgetting the house always wins.
So that vote becomes a major thematic moment.
Absolutely central. It shows the depth of that debt-fueled desperation and the power of that illusion, the illusion of fair chance, the lottery ticket dream, even when the ticket costs your life.
Sources compared it to the choice the recruiter gives, right? Blue circle or red cross. Stay in the dream or face reality.
Exactly. Stay and gamble, blue circle. Or wake up to the harsh outside world, red cross bread. And importantly, some sources argue against just blaming the players who vote yes. They say demonizing the O voters ignores the real enemy, the rich, the system that creates a situation where that gamble feels like the only way out.
That's a powerful point. The players are victims fighting victims. But, okay, despite tense games like Mingle, did some critics feel the stakes flagged later on?
Yeah, that criticism pops up, feeling that maybe the main group of new characters felt a bit too safe for too long. They survived major games, perhaps lessening that constant sense of dread compared to Season 1's unpredictability.
Eliminations still happen, though, like Kim Young-mi.
Oh, for sure. Key eliminations happen, and they have impact, like Young-mi's death affecting Hyun-ju. But maybe the pacing of eliminations for the core group felt different to some.
And this seems to connect to a big criticism about the Season 2 ending itself. Sources called it abrupt, a cliffhanger.
Very much so. A common feeling reported was that Season 2 felt like a build-up season. It didn't offer a complete story on its own, leaving you hanging for Season 3.
Why was that? Production reasons.
That's what the sources link it to. Apparently, the creator initially envisioned a larger story that got split into Seasons 2 and 3. They were filmed back-to-back. And the perception, reported in some sources, is that this split might have been influenced by Netflix, wanting more seasons out of their mega hit, money, contracts, that kind of thing. Season 3 is definitely planned as the finale.
So the critique is that Season 2 ended up feeling like filler, just setting the table for the final season.
That was a significant criticism, yeah.
Yeah.
Leaving viewers waiting for the real fireworks. Some expected maybe more on the VIPs or bigger reveals about the front man in Season 2, which didn't fully happen, adding to that feeling of it being incomplete.
Behind the masks, returning characters, and the organization.
Okay, let's shift from the players to the people pulling the strings. The front man, Hwang In-ho, Lee Byung-hun, he's back, and sources say his role is bigger this season.
The enigmatic boss. What more do we learn about him? His motivations?
Sources suggest more complexity. Lee Byung-hun himself apparently said in interviews that he played In-ho as feeling emotional, even hesitating before killing Jung-bae. So not just a cold monster, maybe some connection formed, some remaining humanity. Killing Jung-bae was maybe partly a brutal lesson for Gi-hun.
Showing the consequences of resistance.
Seems like it. The sources also dig into why he's still doing this. And just to be clear, he's not player 001 in this season that was Oh Il-nam in S1. Some interpretations suggest In-ho's role is maybe about proving a cynical point to Gi-hun.
Like what?
Like, despite Gi-hun's efforts, people are fundamentally trash, easily corrupted, that fighting the system is pointless because human nature itself is flawed. It's a really bleak, pessimistic view tied into the critique of capitalism, seeing his role as necessary, given that dark belief. He's complicit.
Is there any sign he struggles with this role?
Sources mention hints of internal conflict, maybe a scene plan for S3 where he seems emotional, suggesting it takes a toll. Yeah. And then there's that fan theory again.
The one connecting him to player 001.
Yeah, the idea that the front man might be Oh Il-nam's son. It tries to link their positions as game masters and that 001 connection, adding another potential layer to his backstory. Pure speculation, but it's out there.
Meanwhile, what about his brother? The detective, Hwang Jun-ho. He survived Season 1's ending.
Confirmed. He survived the fall, and his parallel story continues. Still desperately searching for In-ho.
Is he getting closer?
Sources indicate his investigation is making progress. His team is reportedly closing in on the front man's location. So it seems like they're setting up a big confrontation between the brothers for Season 3, finally paying off that thread.
And above the front man, the VIPs, shadowy billionaires.
They're still there. The ultra-rich global elite gambling on human lives. They embody that stark two sets of rules critique.
One for the rich, untouchable in their privilege. One for the poor, fighting for scraps.
Exactly. Though some sources did note a criticism here that Season 2 maybe didn't expose the VIPs enough. Since they're the ultimate villains, the ones perpetuating it all, some felt they could have been explored more.
What's the organization's main goal then? Just keeping the games going?
Seems to be about maintaining hidden power, protecting this incredibly lucrative, horrifying enterprise. And one source offered a really specific, symbolic interpretation of the decor in the players' dorms, the patterns on the walls.
Oh, what do they see?
They described it as crosses at the bottom, morphing into inverted crosses or satanic symbols higher up. Their reading, it represents a satanic elite ruling over the masses.
Whoa, okay. That's quite a take.
Yeah, it's a very critical interpretation. They saw it as the showrunners doing a revelation of the method, exposing how elites supposedly control people, divide them, rig the game, infiltrate any resistance. It shows the depth of analysis this show inspires, even if that reading is pretty out there for some.
Deepening the dive. Themes and critique.
Okay, stepping back to the big picture themes. Season 2 isn't just more of the same. Sources really emphasize, it amplifies the critique of capitalism from Season 1. Descriptions like, Allegory of capitalist hell, a hell of our own making. The director's intent is explicit. It is an allegory for modern capitalist society.
So it doubles down on wealth inequality.
Absolutely. The games become an even starker metaphor for how the system forces desperate people into brutal situations just to survive.
It's that rigged system idea again. The rich are untouchable, the poor fight each other.
Exactly. Untouchable, ensconced in their privilege, while the poor fight amongst themselves for the scraps. And any idea of equal opportunity is shown to be a total lie because the powerful start with all the advantages.
And that addresses the question of why people would return, right? The sources connect it to how bad things are outside the game.
Precisely. The crushing exploitation and unfairness of the real world makes the deadly gamble seem almost rational. If you're going to suffer under capitalism anyway, why not risk it all for the tiny chance of escape?
It reminds me of that idea sources mentioned, the dull compulsion of economic relations.
Yeah, that people participate in the system not because they believe in it, but because they feel they have no other choice. Driven by debt, by necessity. The games just make that compulsion terrifyingly literal.
And this isn't just theory. Sources connect this directly to real-world stuff, especially in South Korea.
Oh, absolutely. Household debt crisis, soaring housing prices. One source cited figures household debt value rocketing between 2011 and 2021. Seoul housing prices up almost 50% since 2015.
And the human cost.
Another source pointed to academic research linking debt across Asia to serious mental health problems, depression, anxiety, even suicide attempts. It makes the show's portrayal of desperation feel chillingly realistic. The commentary feels sharper and more urgent than ever.
Within this hellscape, how does human nature hold up or break down?
The new games really push those moral boundaries further. You see alliances form out of pure need, then shatter instantly with brutal betrayals, people fighting even at others' expense.
It's disturbing how the environment itself seems to corrupt people.
Yeah, one observation was how even non-sociopathic characters can become almost eager for others to die just to improve their own odds.
Yeah.
It's deeply dehumanizing.
But it's not all bleak. You mentioned characters like Hyunju showing empathy, and Gi-hun's struggle.
Right. It's complex. Hyunju maintains leadership and helps others. Gi-hun is constantly wrestling with his own empathy versus the brutal necessities of the fight. It's not suggesting everyone is inherently bad, but that the system makes people do bad things.
And Gi-hun's return itself.
Yeah.
It brings up that cycle of violence idea again, doesn't it?
Definitely. Even trying to stop the games means getting pulled back into the violence. Can you really break the cycle without becoming part of it?
And the frontman's possible message that fighting is futile because people are inherently trash reinforces that pessimism. Is change even possible?
That's the dark question the show seems to pose. Is the cycle inevitable?
The dehumanization is also key. The uniforms, the numbers.
Stripping away individuality, making them pawns. And the organization's facelessness, the masks, the symbols, reinforces that systematic oppressive feel. One source called it insidious. Nonconformity equals elimination.
And that connects to the psychology of the players, right? The gambler mentality.
Totally. Sources explore how that extreme pressure plus the lure of money overrides logic. Desperate people become reckless gamblers, high on adrenaline, convinced they can beat the rigged system.
Like in the vote scene, choosing the long shot gamble over immediate safety because the alternative reality is just too bleak.
Exactly. It shows how predators like the recruiter exploit that desperation. Their whole power comes from understanding and leveraging that deep human need and fear.
And finally, just to circle back on Hyunju, her specific story really adds that layer about societal barriers, doesn't it?
Crucially, sources are clear. Her debt, her reason for being there, is directly linked to the real discrimination trans people face in South Korea. It grounds the allegory.
And her portrayal, avoiding spectacle, showing others empathy grow, it becomes a commentary itself.
Yeah, on stigma, on the need for empathy. One source had that beautiful quote about transness being about empathy for the other inside yourself and the other inside someone else. It elevates her story.
Even with the casting controversy, the intent behind the portrayal, according to sources, aimed for something positive and resonant about understanding difference and its consequences.
It adds a really significant, specific layer to the show's critique, yeah.
Allegory in action and global echoes.
So pulling it all together, Season 2 is still very much that potent allegory, that mirror to society.
And not just South Korea. Sources stress the themes are damn near universal. Financial desperation, rigged systems, the lure of wealth that resonates everywhere.
They shows increased brutality, the psychological tension. Sources see that as making the commentary hit even harder.
Yeah, making the allegory more visceral, more uncomfortable.
And did it hit hard globally? Viewership numbers were huge, right?
Massive debut, something like 68 million views reported. Initially, the global fascination is definitely still there.
But the critical reception was more mixed this time, compared to Season 1's near-unanimous praise.
Definitely more varied, ranged from generally favorable, like an 80 on Metacritic, to quite critical reviews calling it a letdown, while others still found it sensational.
What were the main criticisms reported in the sources?
Things like a lack of truly groundbreaking new games or concepts, some plot points, especially Gi-hun's external fight, feeling unrealistic, underdeveloped new characters mentioned, like someone called Shooter 011.
And the ending, yeah. Feeling like filler for Season 3.
That was a big one, the abrupt cliffhanger feeling. Also, some found the music choices odd or distracting this time around.
Why the dip in hype compared to Season 1, according to the sources?
Partly just losing the shock value of the initial premise, partly the feeling of it being a bridge season. And then there was speculation reported in sources about maybe less artistic freedom, the pressures of being a global Netflix hit, needing more content, potentially influencing decisions.
The irony of a show critiquing capitalism maybe being shaped by capitalist pressures itself.
Exactly. That undercurrent was noted.
But despite all that, it still captivated millions and kept fueling those big conversations about society.
No doubt. Its cultural impact remains huge.
So wrapping up our deep dive, Season 2 sharpens the knife, digs deeper into the critique of capitalism, debt, inequality. It explores darker corners of human nature under pressure, the mechanics of exploitation.
It holds up that chilling mirror to global pressures, using amplified horror to make its points about a rigged system and its human cost.
Which leaves us with some heavy thoughts, doesn't it? Like, if the show argues the real enemy is the system run by the elite, not the other struggling people, how do you even fight that system in real life when debt and desperation feel so overwhelming?
That's the $1 million, or maybe 45.6 billion won question, isn't it? And maybe another one. Considering the mixed reviews, the feeling of incompleteness, what does the show's own journey being split into seasons, potentially influenced by platform demands, tell us about those same capitalist pressures shaping even the critiques of capitalism?
A real feedback loop to chew on.
Definitely. Food for thought while we wait for that final season.